welcome everyone. Before I get to what we do, one of the really nice things about this industry, I think, is the collaboration and consensus and comedy there is between all the organizations. So in Washington, for example, SMPTE, SPE, and AES all work together to plan events, including this one. But also, NAB and ATSC helped us with this, which was fantastic. And we see this also like in the standards work from ATSC and SMPTE and others. So I think that's a really wonderful part of our industry, and something we should really celebrate. An example of that is what we have coming up. So next month, in our local section, we're going to have a tour of one of the news facilities in DC that's just converted to 2110. There are 2 large news bureaus for the networks that have all gone 2110. We're going to pick one of those for that event. In March, James Snyder is putting together a program about the restoration of the Apollo 11 audio tapes from Mission Control. There were 30-track audio tapes that they had to build machines and restore to recover that audio that was used in the movie Apollo 11. And that's actually one of our Media Forward events, which is a student outreach event. So that's actually Montgomery College, where we also try to produce events that will excite the next generation about coming into our industry. So not only are we here talking about next generation technology, but we shouldn't forget there's also a next generation of people we need to bring on board as well. And in April, we're planning on a lighting for a TV workshop. Also another student engaged event at Taos University. We haven't picked a date yet. And in May, we're planning on doing a repeat of our 2110 all-day workshop that Carl Paulson back there led last year. And we will pick whichever one of those news facilities we didn't do the tour of in February to actually host that, hopefully. We're still working on that. And then in June, we're actually looking to do another all-day event. And the May one is an all-day event. The June one is another all-day event using archival material and contemporary productions to be held at the Library of Congress facility in Culpeper, Virginia. So a lot of really interesting programs coming on. And I just really want to thank everybody who helped put this event together. First, I want to thank Chris Lane from WETA. And all the team of WETA here, because this is such a collaboration. This is such a great event. And we showed up yesterday, and there were 6 people from WETA here all day helping put this together. You guys have been fantastic. I forgot that we had a deal. We'd only go to 80 people. And next thing I know, we had 120 registered, which was far above what we even planned. So we had, thank you for squeezing in here, everybody. I know it's a little cozy, but we really needed to make sure that everybody who wanted to be here could be here.
Good morning and welcome to WETA. We're really pleased to host this event with SMPTE and SPE, and we're thrilled to have ATSC here with Madeline and Skip and Lynn and everybody. And as Fred said, there's a lot of really smart people in the room. So I was saying to somebody earlier that an event like this, not so much the subject what have you, but putting this event on, it's a little bit more intimidating than my repack and running a station. But we're thrilled to have everybody here, and I think ATS NextGen Television. We've gone through testing and experimentation and test stations, and now I think as a broadcaster, we're looking for the next step and how this is all going to roll out. So again, welcome. I don't know if anybody mentioned. Bathrooms to your right, out the door, right straight behind the wall here. Other than that, let's have a great meeting. Thank you.
And don't go beyond that hallway, because if you go any further, you'll set off a motion detector and alarms, and they'll come running for you here. So stop at the bathrooms. Great. Okay. So next up, you want to key it off?
Sure, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay.
We are very pleased to have representation from both ATSC and the NAB. Lynn Claudy is going to give the NAB spin, and then we're going to hear from Madeline. Who wants to go first?
Lynn's going first.
You're going to go first, Lynn? You want a lav or a handheld, or you want to stand here?
I'll just stand.
Okay.
Stand here. So starting off with transforming the consumer experience, which is an easy phrase to say and a tougher task to do. But I'm going to do it in one slide to start off with, because in this room, rooms like this, over the past few years, we talk a lot about ATSC 3.0, but if we're really going to transform the consumer experience, we don't talk about that anymore. It's NextGen TV. So done. I'm finished. Madeline, it's your turn. We're done with the transformation. I wish it were that simple. It Parts of it will be that simple, parts of it will not. Let me tell you a little bit about ATSC because people are going to ask at least how to spell it and what it stands for. It's the Advanced Television Systems Committee, and it's the standards development organization for digital television broadcasting. It's been around a long time, over 35 years. We started, NAB was one of the founders, and the other four on here, some of which are in the room and some of which are sponsors for this event. But it is the standards organization that is focused on terrestrial digital television broadcasting. It is an open due process organization, as any SDO would be. Unlike SBE and SMPTE, members are organizations, not individuals. Current roster is about 140, maybe a little bit north of 140 organizations, and they make up the entire ecosystem of the broadcast industry, all the way from production to the living room television. So ATSC's mission is focused on broadcasting, on digital television broadcasting, and moving that forward. And of course, that's what ATSC 3.0, also known as NextGen TV, is all about. So the first major DTV standard from ATSC was adopted in 1995 by the industry, in 1996 by the FCC. It was the first digital broadcasting standard, and it introduced the world to high definition video, as well as multicasting, surround sound, and other features. And this was, many of you lived through this process and know how revolutionary a concept it was. At the time, people said it'll never fly, Orville, but it did. And the digital television transition went on, started in 1998, and ended 11 years later. We just had the 10-year anniversary of analog television being shut off on June 12th, 2009, which was basically a non-event day because everyone did such a good job in promoting digital television. So we've been all digital for 10 years, and boy, that's long enough not to upgrade in the world today, because everything is advancing. Things that weren't there in 1995, the iPhone, the iPad, tablets in general, smart TVs, the world has definitely changed, and digital television really hasn't. So it's time to get on board to be able to address all these new topics. Like any industry, if you're not evolving, especially in a digital industry, once you start being digital, you got to keep moving, or else you're hopelessly behind. And we believe that ATSC 3.0, certainly in the U.S., is the next step for us. So this began almost 10 years ago, back in 2010, with planning, and spent a couple of years working on the requirements of, if we're going to move off of digital television, what's the next great thing, and what do we have to make sure is in the standard, and what would be superfluous, and what should we spend our time on. And that really did take a couple of years, and there's a document of requirements. There's 140 odd requirements for the new standard that were used as the guideposts in developing ATSC 3. And that development more or less took 4 or 5 years, and standards started coming out of the 3.0 process in about 2017, and were a complete set in 2018, and continued to evolve into 2019 and 2020. But the reason this was such a problem is that it's non-backwards compatible. The old sets will not work, will not respond to an ATSC 3.0 system. It is completely new, and it has all the improvements that would go along with a completely new system. But because it's non-backwards compatible, there was a great emphasis put on, well, this better be really, really good to make it worth the trouble that's going to accrue from saying that old television set won't work anymore. So the goal is to improve television generally, get better quality, make it more accessible, make it personalized, interactive, realize that consumers aren't as they were in the 1950s, and they are mobile and they have other devices and they want their content on all those devices. And broadcasting needs to be a valued partner in that new ecosystem to be able to reach these people in the new ways they want to access content. So it's worth doing, if for only the reason that you got to keep up with the Joneses in digital media. If you're not keeping up, you're falling behind. There are expectations out there that demand you do that. There's a lot of new competition and disruption that we didn't have for decades. Broadcasters were king of the hill. Now they're not, and they need to reassert themselves to have a place on the hill, even if it's not at the top. Should be at the top, but even if it's not, you want to be on the hill. And from the broadcaster perspective, the pressure on broadcasters to be more efficient because of the loss of spectrum over the years, and the expectations of audiences, it leads you to be more efficient in your spectrum use. That's not a goal per se. No one says, wow, I'm more spectrum efficient, don't you love me? But the fact that you are allows you to do other things. And this is definitely the era of you got to do more with less. And then finally, one of the ways to counteract that narrowing of spectrum is to access and be seamlessly integrated with services from other delivery methods, primarily the internet and online broadband sorts of things. So leveraging the power of putting together over-the-air and online broadband in a meaningful way, not lip service to it, but in a true integrated fashion, makes all this worthwhile. So broadcasters get to keep their audience, they get to build an audience, they get to reach their viewers in new ways, they benefit from all the new technologies, they get to grow in a couple of different dimensions, and finally, hopefully, develop new revenue streams, because ultimately we're all in business to stay in business, and that requires revenue. So out of that whole big 2-year requirements phase, you had qualitative goals. Madeline will talk more about these in detail, but the idea of doing higher quality transmissions, being more efficient so you can have more content streams, getting to mobile audiences, personalization, because people want things to be personalized, getting out of the shackles of being real-time and having on-demand content, and being interactive. That graphic of vote for Alicia, it must have been the American Idol thing. I don't know if she won or not. No one's ever been able to tell me whether people did vote for Alicia or not. But interactivity, very important thing. The result of all that became instantiated as the standards known as ATSC 3.0, which were released in their first form. Notice went out at CES, which we just suffered through last week, 2 years ago, January 9th, 2018. The suite of standards was released. It's a set of 20 different standards and some recommended practices, and together that embraces the full concept in all aspects of ATSC 3.0. So move forward 2 years to now. The full suite is completed, but each standard, like anything else in digital, is evolving and changing, and each of those standards can be improved, fixed, or extended, and that happens at its own pace. But the document at the top, A300, is the guideline to the rest of the standards. So A300 gives you the list of the version of each of the other standards that makes up ATSC 3.0 for that year. So right now we have A300:2019, and that defines which version of all the other standards is relevant for 2019. If you're involved with a test station, you know that that is a godsend to understand which version should you be looking at, because each piece of equipment probably has had 56 different variations of software in it, and when you start putting 6 of those, 8 of those pieces of equipment together, the versions matter a whole lot because interoperability is key. So the rubric of ATSC 3.0 is that approximately on a yearly basis, A300 will be amended with a year name after it to define the set of standards that are relevant for that year. And A300 2020 is slated to be adopted, I believe, in April of this year, and it'll continue from there. So we now have more or less the production and the transmission end of things locked up. Manufacturers are making product, have been for a while, been working out kinks in test stations. So we're moving to the consumer side, and that's where things really have to work perfectly, if not better than perfectly, because the consuming public is unforgiving, as opposed to all you people that are totally a nice bunch to work with when things go wrong. So the NextGen TV logo, you're going to see that a lot today. I'm sure everyone's going to say, here's the new logo for NextGen TV. Only I was able to be the first one to show it to you. But this was announced in the fall at the CTA Fall Forum. Brian Markwelder will talk about that, no doubt. At CES, just a couple of pictures here. Something else you'll hear about a lot today from last week's Consumer Electronics Show. ATSC was an actual exhibitor at the show in a very nice booth in the Central Hall, and it was more or less mobbed most of the time. There is a lot of appetite from the consumer electronics industry, not just the people the big 3 manufacturers that are making products, but the larger consumer electronics community. A lot of interest in NextGen TV and ATSC 3.0 and all the ecosystem that is developing there. So it was a big deal last week. For us, it was a big deal here. This was the kind of the coming out party for NextGen TV, an event with our president, Gordon Smith, and Madeline Nolan, sitting here in the first row as president of ATSC, and Gary Shapiro, president of CTA, all came together to talk about how broadcasters and the consumer electronics community and everyone in between, including standards, have developed this system, not piece parts of a system, but a system that is going to be foisted upon the consumer population, and they're going to love it. So that is my introduction. Madeline is going to talk more about transforming the consumer experience in more detailed terms. So I'll just turn it over to Madeline.